Today is Thursday, February 12th, 2026. The time is 7:01 p.m. Eastern. Welcome to Geopolitical Updates from AGI Era. In a monumental shift for environmental policy, the United States has just witnessed the revocation of a landmark ruling that classified greenhouse gases as a threat to public health. This unprecedented move, characterized by the White House as the most extensive deregulation in American history, signals a decisive pivot from established climate protocols. The previous ruling, which underpinned a decade of environmental regulations, is now nullified, clearing the path for industries to operate without the constraints of federal emissions standards. This action has immediately ignited a firestorm of controversy, with environmental advocacy groups projecting dire economic and ecological consequences for the nation. The implications for global climate initiatives, already fragile, appear significant. We'll delve into the strategic ramifications of this policy reversal in our Deep Analysis segment later in the broadcast. Turning our attention to East Asia, South Korean intelligence sources report that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has designated his teenage daughter as his successor. This highly unusual public positioning of Kim Joo-ae, believed to be around 10 years old, marks a significant departure from the traditionally male-dominated succession patterns within the Workers' Party of Korea. While speculation about her role has been ongoing since her initial public appearances in late 2022, Seoul's National Intelligence Service now officially assesses her as the chosen heir. This development raises crucial questions regarding the long-term stability of the reclusive nation and its future geopolitical orientation. In a separate development concerning nuclear capabilities, new satellite imagery indicates Iran is actively fortifying an underground complex adjacent to a known nuclear facility. The observed construction suggests an enhancement of defensive measures around sensitive sites, occurring amidst persistent tensions and ongoing, albeit slow, diplomatic engagements between Iranian and U.S. officials concerning Tehran's nuclear program. This fortification effort could be interpreted as a strategic measure to safeguard nuclear infrastructure, potentially complicating future international inspection regimes and heightening regional anxieties. Shifting to maritime affairs, 2 U.S. Navy ships were involved in a collision earlier today near the coast of South America. Initial reports indicate minor injuries to 2 personnel aboard the vessels. The specific circumstances leading to the incident remain under investigation, with military authorities providing limited details. Such occurrences, while sometimes accidental, invariably trigger concerns regarding operational safety, naval readiness, and freedom of navigation in strategically important waterways. Meanwhile, in Southeast Asia, polls have officially closed in Bangladesh, marking the first general election since a wave of Gen Z-led protests led to the ousting of the long-serving leader, Sheikh Hasina. This election is being closely watched as a critical test for the nation's democratic aspirations, following a period of authoritarian rule spanning 15 years. Voters are hopeful for a return to transparent governance and a more robust democratic framework. The outcome will be pivotal for Bangladesh's political trajectory and its relationships with regional and international partners. In domestic news from the United States, the Trump administration has announced the conclusion of the intensive immigration enforcement campaign in Minnesota, colloquially known as Operation Metro Surge. This operation had garnered significant criticism following the deaths of 2 U.S. citizens in Minneapolis during the crackdown. The administration's border czar stated that the surge had achieved its objectives, though specific metrics for success were not immediately provided. The cessation of this controversial initiative will likely be met with mixed reactions from both proponents and critics of the immigration policies. Lastly, from Europe, Norway's former prime minister has been formally charged with gross corruption. The charges stem from alleged links to the late financier Jeffrey Epstein and were brought forward after the Council of Europe revoked his immunity, which he held as its former Secretary General. This high-profile case underscores ongoing international efforts to hold powerful individuals accountable for illicit activities, highlighting the complexities of prosecuting alleged crimes that span national borders and involve individuals in positions of influence. Our deep analysis today focuses on the recent decision by the U.S. administration to revoke the landmark ruling classifying greenhouse gases as a danger to public health. This decision effectively dismantles a foundational element of American climate policy, representing the most extensive regulatory rollback in the nation's history. The previous ruling, established in 2009 by the Environmental Protection Agency under the Clean Air Act, provided the legal basis for regulating carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping gases. Its revocation signifies a fundamental recalibration of federal environmental priorities. This move follows a consistent pattern by the current administration to prioritize economic expansion and deregulation over environmental protection, echoing a decade-long ideological push to dismantle what it deems as burdensome climate policies. The White House defends its decision by arguing that these regulations stifle industrial growth and competitiveness. Proponents of the rollback suggest it will unleash economic activity, particularly in energy-intensive sectors like manufacturing, transportation, and agriculture, by reducing compliance costs and fostering innovation unfettered by environmental mandates. They point to potential job creation and increased energy independence as direct benefits. However, the strategic "so what" of this policy reversal is multifaceted and could have profound long-term consequences, both domestically and internationally. Economically, while some industries may experience short-term gains due to reduced regulatory burdens, environmental groups and a consensus of scientific bodies predict significant costs in the longer run. These include increased public health expenditures due to worsened air quality, elevated infrastructure costs from more frequent and intense extreme weather events, and potentially diminished agricultural yields. For instance, the National Bureau of Economic Research recently published a report suggesting that the cumulative economic cost of climate inaction could significantly outweigh the cost of mitigation measures within 2 decades, impacting gross domestic product by several percentage points. From a geopolitical standpoint, this action sends a clear signal to the international community regarding the U.S.'s commitment to global climate agreements. It potentially undermines efforts to collectively address climate change, particularly as other nations strive to meet their own emissions targets under frameworks like the Paris Agreement. Allies and adversaries alike will be observing how this policy shift affects America's diplomatic leverage and its standing as a leader in environmental governance. There's a risk of a race to the bottom, where other nations might feel less compelled to adhere to strict environmental standards if the U.S., a major emitter, is seen to be disengaging. This could complicate trade relations, with some countries potentially imposing carbon tariffs on U.S. goods, leading to trade disputes. The EU, for example, has been explicit about its intention to implement such measures. Furthermore, this deregulation could exacerbate existing geopolitical tensions around resource scarcity and climate migration. Regions already vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, such as rising sea levels, prolonged droughts, and desertification, might experience intensified destabilization, leading to increased humanitarian crises and migratory pressures. This could directly impact U.S. foreign policy and aid commitments, as resources might need to be redirected to address the consequences of a rapidly changing climate abroad. The rollback also calls into question the future of American leadership in green technology innovation, potentially ceding ground to countries that are investing heavily in renewable energy and sustainable development. In essence, while the immediate objective of this rollback appears to be economic stimulus through deregulation, its broader implications suggest a significant realignment of U.S. domestic policy with considerable reverberations across global economic, environmental, and diplomatic landscapes. The move could foster a period of increased uncertainty for international climate cooperation and present new challenges for global stability. Today, we've seen the U.S. administration revoke a key climate ruling, signaling a major policy shift, while North Korea's succession plans appear to solidify around Kim Jong-un's daughter. These developments underscore a dynamic global landscape. For your watch list tomorrow, monitor any official reactions from the EU or China regarding the U.S. climate policy reversal, particularly concerning potential trade implications or renewed commitments to their own climate initiatives. Additionally, keep an eye on developments in Bangladesh as initial results from their pivotal election begin to emerge, indicating whether the nation is indeed moving towards a more robust democratic era.